Hello, in part two of this presentation, I'm going to be talking about the Steampunk Explorer and how you can get publicity for your book in the Steampunk Explorer if you happen to be a steampunk author, but more broadly, of probably of broader interest to the people watching here, I'm going to try to provide some tips for getting publicity just in general, for dealing with editors and reporters in general who might be inclined to write about your books. So let's get right into it. First, a little bit about the Steampunk Explorer. It is an online publication that covers steampunk related news, events, people, places, etc. Emphasis on news and events. Those are my two main areas of coverage. It launched in 2018. It just underwent a redesign, and I'll be taking you on a little tour of the redesign later on. And it is not it's not really intended as a business per se. It's reader supported, but I never envisioned it as a big money making venture. It's more like a labor of love that happens to take up a lot of my time. So moving on, my name is Stephen Beale, and I'm a semi-retired journalist. I've been in this business for a very long time. I am a lifelong science fiction fan, which is one of the things that led me to steampunk. I discovered steampunk in 2011, and although, as I said, I'm a lifelong science fiction fan, I actually came to steampunk through the art, which steampunk is not. It started as a literary genre. If you recall if you watched part one, you'll find that steampunk started as a literary genre, and it kind of evolved into a culture that had a lot of different elements, including art. I came to it through the art, but I also appreciate the literature. And another thing I should note is that I do everything. I did the web development. I am the editor, the writer. I occasionally get contributions of photography from people who go to events and take photos and allow me to use them. But for the most part, it's all me. I do the whole publication, which is the only way it could really happen because there is not a lot of money to sustain a publication like this, so I got to basically do everything myself. So moving on, my editorial approach, I have lots of news and event coverage, as I said. I have a heavy emphasis on visuals, and of great interest to this audience, the people watching, I do not do reviews. So if you're looking to get coverage in my publication, you're looking for news coverage. I do have a widely read news column I'll be talking about, and that is your best opportunity for getting the word out from my website is news coverage, not reviews of your books. Now, my major activities. So I have the website, which is the main core of the venture: news, features, calendar, etc. I have a weekly newsletter, which is what I just referred to. It's called Steampunk Digest. So people can subscribe and get it by email for free. But I also post it on the website, so people can also read it on the website. And that's probably the most read part of the website. I have about 3,200 opt-in subscribers, very high open rate, about 40% open rate. And so a lot of people do see that newsletter, and these are real hardcore steampunk fans. So if you do get coverage in my publication, a lot of people will see it, and but of course it's got to be steampunk. And I also have video channels. I have a YouTube and Vimeo channel. I do a series called The World of Steampunk, and the and that's a major part of what I do as well. That's an opportunity for me to tell stories visually that can't easily be told in on the website. Now, I'm active on social media. Lately, I've been more active on Blue Sky and Mastodon. I have a pretty good following on Facebook. The problem with Facebook is that the Facebook algorithm downranks uh, um, posts that contain links. And since the purpose of me being on social media is to get people to come into my website and read the stories, Facebook kind of defeats that purpose. So I really encourage people to follow me on Blue Sky and Mastodon, where I'll post links to all my stories so you can kind of see what I'm doing. I will post stuff on Facebook, but there's less of a chance that it's going to show up in your feed because of the way Facebook handles posts that contain links. So that's just sort of a general issue with Facebook. They want to keep you on Facebook. They don't want you leaving Facebook. So their algorithm takes care of a lot of that. So moving on, how to support the Steampunk Explorer. I'm on Patreon and I have a tip jar. So you can join the Patreon and pay as little as $1 a month to uh, basically support the site. You do get some content, but it's mainly to support the site. And have a tip jar if you just want to make a one-time contribution. These are not tax deductible. I'm not a nonprofit. It's technically for profit. Doesn't make a lot of profit, but technically that's what it is legally. And so, but if you do want to, kind of chip in, you can do so via PayPal as well. And those are the links there. Now, here's the redesign. So I'm going to interrupt the PowerPoint here and take you on a tour of the new website. So here is the new look of the Steampunk Explorer. I introduced this redesign at the end of December, and it's quite a change in terms of the look from the previous one. Although all the information that was in the old website is still here. So I just want to kind of take you through some of the main features. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but as you can see, there is the home page has feature stories, and then there's a section on the right with kind of newsy section, a newsroom. Steampunk Digest is a weekly column that covers the news in brief. And this is where I do a lot of the book coverage is in this section. So this goes out by email every week, and then I post it on the website. So, and not only am I writing about new books, but here I wrote about some awards for books, which if a steampunk book wins an award, I'm open to hearing about it. I won't necessarily write about it depending on the exact award, but good to know about. It just so happens as I'm recording this is late January, and I have just posted. I'm posting year in review stories. So this is the year in books. So this is just a roundup of all the big news that happened last year in books and steampunk. Actually, I got the big news and smaller news too. This is a pretty comprehensive roundup. It might not be the lead story when you see this video, but the story's still there. Now, one of the new things is I have these sections for different interest areas in steampunk, and one of them is books and comics. So this is a place where I kind of gather together all my coverage about books and comics in one place. So people who are particularly interested in this subject can look it up here. I have some directories over here on the right. Steampunk authors. This is a listing of steampunk authors. And I also have some resources for authors or for readers. So there's like a list of literary organizations, literary resources, Digital Public Library of America, resources that might be useful for writers and readers. History organizations, if you're doing, research about history, some places that might be useful resources for you. So I have that here. And then more and more resources, history collections. So this is something, and even if you're not specifically a steampunk author, you still might find this to be useful because, like, if you write about history, not necessarily steampunk, but if you write about history, there might be some stuff here for you. And I also want to point out the event section. This is kind of a major feature of the site. It's one of the most popular parts of the site. I have a really comprehensive events listing. And I don't just cover steampunk events. I cover science fiction conventions. I cover comic cons. I cover book fairs. And I have the listings are separated by region, by U.S. regions like Mountain Zone, Midwest Zone. I have a section for Canada, UK, Europe. Oceania is for New Zealand and Australia. If you're a genre author, if you're a fantasy or horror or science fiction author, and you're looking for conventions, maybe where you want to publicize your work, you might find them listed in the calendar here. Here are the actual listings. This is a big event, the Edwardian Ball. So this event has its own page with more descriptive information, links, the upcoming event, and past articles I have done on the event. And one other thing I want to point out here is that I have now, this is kind of new, I have a directories of conventions. These are the kind of the bigger conventions. So these are standing pages. These are not calendar listings, but these are pages with information about these conventions in case you're kind of looking at what are the major conventions, where might I want to see if I can have a table or speak or something like that. And they're listed here. So this is an example. This is the page for BayCon, which is the San Francisco Bay Area convention. And so there's links to their social media, their website, their upcoming event, and an article that I did back in 2018 about the convention. So this is a little resource here. Again, maybe useful to you, even if you're not a steampunk writer, just a science fiction or fantasy writer looking for what's going on. It's all here. Now, for the part that many of you have been waiting for, especially if you don't happen to be a steampunk author, is I'm going to talk about publicity. And I think of this as sort of a publicity 101. Now, a few caveats before I continue. I am not a publicist. I'm not a professional publicist. I have never worked as a publicist. But I have been a professional journalist for more than 40 years. And that means I've been on the receiving end of more PR pitches than I can possibly count. Now, in addition to that, I spent 15 years as the editor of a trade publication for PR people. And in that job, I spoke with many other journalists to get their insights about effective PR practices. So, what you're going to be hearing is sort of the collective insight of the people who are on the receiving end of publicity. And so I might not have a lot of tricks, the publicist tricks for dealing with the media, but I'm going to talk about what's most effective from the standpoint of the people who actually are on the receiving end of this stuff. So, publicity in 2025 in the modern era. I'm going to be talking mostly about how to pitch the traditional media because that is my background. And I'm talking about newspapers and magazines, websites that are run by people who have worked in the print media, um, you know, and the traditional media is slowly dying, but it's still there. It's still a good way to get the word out. And a lot of what I'm going to be saying is still going to be relevant, even if you're getting publicity in other ways, which I'll explain. We live in a fragmented media environment now, meaning that as the larger media companies have gone out of business or have reduced staff, we're seeing more smaller entities arise. And 10, 20 years ago it was bloggers, but now we've got influencers on social media platforms, and a lot of individual media efforts on places like Substack, where you can just kind of start your own subscription publication and get people to sign on. A lot of former journalists, I mean, not former journalists, but a lot of journalists who formerly worked for major newspapers and magazines now have their own Substacks. Other new channels, TikTok has become a major vehicle for book publicity. We don't know what's going to happen with TikTok right now, but that has been one of the things that TikTok has done, is provided a new avenue for publishers and book authors to promote their work. And there are a lot of these nonprofit sites, as newspapers have gone out of business or have reduced their staffing. In many cities, you now have nonprofit news sites that try to cover the local scene, local politics, local culture, and in some cases, they may be good places to publicize your work. And then new social media platforms, especially Blue Sky. I'm a big proponent of Blue Sky. It's got a reputation for being very political, but it's I think it's if you're an author, I think it's a good place to establish a presence, to get the word out. I've written a lot about it on the Steampunk Explorer website. A lot of steampunk fans have moved there. I think a lot of science fiction fans are moving there. So especially if you're in one of the genres like science fiction, fantasy, horror, Blue Sky is a good place to be. So putting that out. Now, there are two approaches to PR. And one is used by probably like 95% of the PR people out there, and it's not the best approach. That's the spray and pray, which I'm going to talk about. And then there's personal outreach, which is really the ones that the really good PR people do. And I think that's the most effective approach. So I'm going to explain what I mean by these two approaches forthwith. So, spray and pray. The idea of spray and pray is a PR agency will rent a list from a company. There are companies that rent out these lists of journalists, and they get this gigantic list of email addresses, and they send mass emails to these journalists. And what they do is what I call faux personalization. They try to make it sound like they're targeting you, like they're your best friend, and but it's obvious that you're just part of a mass emailing, and they make this kind of feeble effort to personalize it. So here's a good example. This is an actual pitch that I got. I have removed identifying characteristics, but hi, Stephen. I hope your day is going well. The news cycle moves fast, and I know you're always looking for fresh, compelling stories to captivate your audience. Now, here's the thing. This person has no clue what my audience is. They have no clue what I write about, what I do, and that is apparent from the content of this email. So they said, here's a selection of 6 timely topics that are sure to resonate with readers, complete with expert sources. So this is an agency that represents these companies, and these companies have experts who are they're trying to get out into the media to raise awareness of their companies. And so what these 6 timely topics were, here were some of them. Remote workplace software, something called practitioner-assisted therapy, tips for dealing with election stress, a mobile hotspot for travelers, and a Q4 survival guide for small business, none of which has any relevance at all to what I cover. And what you should realize is that journalists get dozens of these things every day. I've heard of people getting hundreds of these things every day. And a lot of our time is spent just going into our inbox and just delete because you're getting all this stuff. And so this is what you're up against: is you've got to kind of break through the noise of this kind of crap that's showing up in everybody's email, in everybody's inboxes. So now here's another kind of ridiculous pitch that I got. This was via Instagram. Your profile has entranced us, and it's clear that your mystique would harmonize perfectly with our Gothic clothing brand. So this is a case where I posted something with a goth hashtag, which is at least somewhat relevant to what I do, but then they're just sending me this ridiculous, horribly worded, message trying to get me to be a brand ambassador where I'll promote their products to my audience. And again, this was a hard no for me. Now, here's something that works. Hi, I'm releasing a new novel, Peevely Manor, on August 27th, and I hope you consider including it in your weekly news roundup. It's a steampunk fantasy comedy, etc., etc. Now, here's the thing. This person knows that I do a weekly news roundup, and he knows that I cover steampunk. He's telling me about something that I'm interested in. So this is what I'm talking about: personal outreach, where this is somebody who knows what I do. They've done their research. They understand that I have a weekly news roundup, that I cover steampunk, and they just send me a really short, nothing fancy, really short message via the contact form on my website asking me to cover their book, which I did. So this is the good approach, not the other ones I just showed you. Research your targets. That's the key of the targeted outreach that I'm talking about. So as opposed to just getting a list and emailing, massive numbers of journalists, figure out what, a handful of outlets that are most likely to cover your book, most likely to be interested in what you do, and focus your efforts on them. And so the questions you should be asking: what topics do they cover? So hopefully they cover books in whatever genre you're writing about. Who is their audience? Hopefully that audience has some overlap with the people who are likely to read your book. What guidelines do they have for publicists? Some websites will actually post information that'll help you figure out, how to approach them, what kinds of things they're interested in. If not, sometimes you can just ask, what's the best way to approach me? Big key question: what's their contact preference? Do they want to get contacted via email? Do they want to be contacted by social media? In my experience, this may be dated now, but at least, it's 5, 10, 15 years ago, most journalists prefer email as opposed to like a DM on social media. Maybe that's changed, but it helps to know what is the journalist's preferred method of being contacted. Now, here's kind of my personal things. So every publication is different to some extent. So the advice for dealing with them is going to vary somewhat, but then there are some things that most of them have in common. So in my case, obviously, if I'm going to be interested in a book, it has to be steampunk related or close. Don't ask me to review your book because I cover news. I don't do reviews. Now, I'm not going to get upset if someone asks me to review their book, because I understand, that's kind of an understandable mistake. But if you really know what I do, I don't do reviews. I cover new. Now, this is kind of a pet peeve. It has to be new. In other words, it has something that news is something that happened recently or is about to happen. You're going to give me kind of forewarning that it's about to happen. And there have been instances where people will tell me, "Well, I got a new book out," and I'll look it up on Amazon, and it came out a year ago or 2 years ago, and then your credibility takes a hit. So be sure, don't misrepresent the fact that it's not, new. Don't say it's new when it's not, and be sure it is. Be sure it truly is news. There are ways to get coverage in my publication where it doesn't necessarily have to be news, but you got to be upfront about it. You got to be straight with me. To the extent possible, avoid hyperbole. I'm usually going to see through it. You kind of expect at least a little bit of hype when people are publicizing their work. But if you tell me it's you got the greatest, you're the greatest writer since Shakespeare, I'm going to probably look a little bit skeptically at that. It's also really important to provide access to artwork, and I will have more to say on that shortly. So, make your initial contact via the contact form on my website. After that, once I hear from you, I'll send you my regular email address. It's better to use that once you've made the initial contact. What is not effective, what some people do is I'll post something on social media, and then someone will put in a comment drawing my attention to their book or whatever. I just came out with this book. I don't like that. Doesn't work well with me. Contact me through the website. Kind of be straightforward. I got a book coming out. Here it is. It's a lot easier for me to deal with that than just somebody commenting on social media. It's just very hard to kind of keep track of that stuff. So this is an example of a news item that I would run about a new book, that I actually did run about a new book. So it's just brief. I just kind of give a brief summary of it. And so this is what you're going to get if you try to reach out to me, is an item like this. Sometimes I'll go longer, but this is pretty much what you're going to get. And you're for me, the challenge is to be able to take the information I get about the book and digest it down into something like this. And sometimes it takes sometimes it takes longer than I would like to do that. And that's one area where you can get on my good side, is by making that easy. So one of my pet peeves here, and this speaks to the previous slide, is the way that authors describe their books. And I'm looking for something where I can just kind of read it and really quickly come up with a couple of sentences to describe the book for readers who are not familiar with your work. And so often I'll get there's these cryptic blurbs that are just really hard to decipher. Instead, what I want to see is something that gives me the 4 Ws of classic journalism: who, what, where, and when. And here's a more detailed look at that. So this was a good description. So somebody tells me about their book. It's a novel about a con woman in 1870s America who can talk to ghosts. And that one sentence, that tells me everything that I really need to describe that book for my readers. who is a con woman. The what is that she can talk to ghosts. The where is America, and the when is the 1870s. Now, this is a different kind of what right here, and this is one I made up. I didn't want to embarrass anybody, but I have seen blurbs like this. I did I kind of made a little more of a parody, but not unlike some blurbs I've seen. The caravan of thunder is coming, and Lady Stanforth knows that the clockwork nimbats can't be far behind, etc., etc., etc. And moving on, because the thing is about these blurbs is they're too long oftentimes, or at least too long to be useful to me. Meanwhile, as the hordes approach, Sister Glenda is left to fend for herself. Can they hold off the fearsome onslaught, or will a new age of darkness descend upon the city? How does this help me figure out what to say about your book? So yeah, there's a who, but the who's are names of people. Sister Glenda and Lady Stanforth and Cogsmith Job. I have no idea, like, really who they are in a way that would make sense to someone who's not already familiar with your work. The what? Some kind of impending doom about clockwork nimbats, whatever they are. No clue about the where, no clue about the when. This is not very helpful if I'm just trying to come up with a really quick summary of your book. Now, here's another one that's okay. Who, what, when, where. Set in a steampunk fantasy world, the story involves a team of misfits on a mission to rescue an inventor who has been imprisoned in a distant city. So who? A team of misfits, not like Larry, Moe, and Curly. What? A mission to save an inventor. Where? A steampunk fantasy world. And here's a little tricky part. The when isn't really stated here, but because it's a steampunk fantasy world, it's kind of timeless. So that's sort of the when, is it's timeless. It's not set in any history that we know about. So this is okay. This works for me. General PR tips. Focus on relationship building. Think like an editor. Make my job as easy as possible. Be reasonable with follow-ups. Accept rejection with grace. So some more details. Relationships. That's the really key here. You want to get to where if the journalist sees your name on an email, they're going to open the email and they're going to look at it because they know that you're professional, that you're straight with them, that you may have good information for them. They're not going to mind hearing from you. So be professional. Spell the words correctly. Use good grammar. Don't necessarily expect you to act like a professional PR person. You don't have to know all the lingo and all that PR people and journalists understand, like embargoes and things like that. That's like an insider term, but try to be as professional as possible. Be a resource. One really good approach is to tip off the journalist to something that's going on that they might be interested in covering. That makes you a resource for them and it helps establish the relationship. Demonstrate that you've done your research, that you understand what they cover, what they're interested in. Be responsive to queries, meaning if the journalist has questions, they want to follow up with questions, respond in a rapid way. And one thing I also wanted to point out is that a really good way to make contact with journalists is at events, because it's always good to get that face-to-face connection. They're more likely to remember you, so if you have the opportunity to be at an event where there are people who are likely to write about your book, take advantage of that. Think like an editor. Understand that I am here to serve my readers. I'm not here to sell your book. However, because my readers may be interested in your book, your challenge is going to be to convince me that my interest in serving my readers and your interest in publicizing your book align. So show me, how my readers are going to be interested in what you're doing. Now, I think if it's a book and the subject matter of the book is close to what I'm covering on the website, it should be obvious that's where the interests align. But sometimes this is where some of the better PR people can really stand out, is figuring out that unusual way in which their client's interest where the journalist may be interested in doing a story that involves their client because they figured out some clever way and a legitimate way to connect their publicity efforts with whatever the journalist is doing. And this is more advanced. Understand what makes a good story. Understand what kinds of stories journalists are going to be interested in writing about versus no. And in some ways, it means kind of separating yourself. Instead of just thinking in terms of, I need this publicity. It's all about me. Step away from that and think about the readers and think about what the readers are going to be interested in, and then figure out a way that you might be able to fit in. Now, this is always a judgment call. There's a lot of judgment calls in journalism, and even if you think you've got a good idea of what a story is, the journalist may disagree, but and that's okay, as long as you're kind of in the ballpark. A journalist is not going to hold that against you. So, and it's just some concrete examples, or one concrete example might be if you see a trend going on and you're a part of that trend and it's something that the general public might be interested in, then tell the journalist about that trend. Maybe show them other people who are examples of that trend in addition to you, but you're also a part of it. And then maybe the journalist will follow up and do a story about it, where you're not going to be the focus of the whole story, but even if you're a part of the story, that helps you. So and maybe you've kind of come upon a new genre that people are not familiar with, and so bring that. Or maybe you live in a community where all of a sudden there are these successful authors doing stuff. Bring that to the journalist's attention. Again, that's more of that might not be PR 101, more of a PR the intermediate level, but something to keep in mind. Make my job easy. This is really key. Journalists are really busy, especially these days with there have been a lot of cutbacks in publications. So anything you can do to save me time and make it easy for me to cover whatever you're doing, the more likely you are to get that coverage, especially if you're kind of in a gray area where the journalist has to make kind of a judgment call as to whether or not to follow up. This is really important. If you're an author, you really should have a website with an online section just for the media that's got your bio and photos that are cleared for use by the media, photos cleared for publicity. They should be horizontal photos and portrait photos, both orientations. I happen to prefer horizontal photos just because of the way my site is designed. And that way, if it's in the middle of the night and I'm writing a story and I stumble upon your new book or whatever and I want to include it, I don't have to bother reaching out to you. I can just grab it off your website. Really important. Second best is send me the artwork and the info when you're making the pitch or offer it to me. And the other part of making my job easy is please don't waste my time. And I'll have more to say about that later, but be succinct. If you're sending me a press release or a pitch, don't make me read through paragraphs and paragraphs to figure out what's going on. Try to help me make the best use of my time. Now, when I was talking about the websites, the newsrooms for the media on websites, these three authors do it really well. Gail Carriger, Sherry Priest, and Sylvia Moreno Garcia. If you look them up, you can Google their names and you look them up on look up their websites. You'll find sections for the press, and they're good models to follow. Follow-ups. This is where you reach out to a journalist and you tell them what's going on and you haven't heard back from them and you're wondering, did they just think I'm, not worth covering, or maybe it just fell through the cracks. Now, this varies by journalists in terms of their openness to getting follow-ups, but in my case, there are cases where I'll see an email and I'll just I'll think, okay, that's interesting, but then I'll forget about it. I won't respond immediately, and then it does fall through the cracks. So in that case, a follow-up is okay. So if you're confident that your pitch is on target, that it's not totally off base, like that one of those earlier ones I showed you, then one or two email follow-ups are okay. So in fact, they're helpful. Don't necessarily assume that just because you haven't heard from me, I'm not interested. It could just be that I'm really busy and haven't had a chance to deal with it. Rejections. Now, sometimes you may really think that you got a good story, that maybe your book is worthy of coverage or something, but maybe I'll disagree and say, no. And if that happens, accept it with grace, and maybe you'll have better luck next time. I'll give you one example. Not necessarily a book author, but a vendor at a festival once contacted me and wanted me to write about what they were vending at the festival. Well, the thing is, there's like 50 vendors at this festival, and I'm just going to write about what you're doing. Then I'll have every other vendor at this festival coming after me to write about what they're doing. So that did not work for me. And I tried to explain that to the person. I don't know how well they took it, but if they're smart, you accept it with grace. And, maybe next time you'll come back to me with, a better pitch that's more in line with what I'm looking to cover. Now, this is very important. Email best practices. Because obviously, a lot of your communications with journalists will be by email, so you want to do this right. First, write your subject line like it's a headline. Understand that journalists are getting dozens and dozens of emails. They're going through very quickly and deleting them in many cases. So you want to catch their attention with the subject line. There should be something in the subject line that tells them it is a press release or a publicity effort, like press release or pitch, something like that. Make it stand out so that they know that you're not spamming them or sending them one of the many pitches they get that are just off target. Get to the point. Don't waste their time. Don't make them wade through lots of verbiage to figure out what you got in terms of information. And one thing that journalists do not like is where someone attaches a press release to the email. Most prefer that you put the body of the press release in the email itself, so they don't have to worry about attachments. A good approach would be put a short note on top, a personalized note that makes it clear that you are a real person, that they're not a recipient of just a mass mailing, something that shows that you have some understanding of what they do, but then put the press release underneath that. That's a good approach. Keep it brief, but make it easy to get additional information if they want it. That's also a good idea. You just don't want to waste their time. And one last thing, don't forget the local media. I wanted to highlight this because a local newspaper or one of these new like nonprofit sites that are cropping up, if you're a local, if you're in their community, they are more likely to be interested in what you do than maybe a national publication or a publication that is based on your genre. You might be reaching out to people who have fantasy blogs who write about fantasy books and trying to get coverage there, and that's fine, that's good. But there may be a local newspaper or a local community site that's interested in what you're doing because you're local, you're in their area, and so don't forget them. And when you're pitching them, you're telling them I'm a local author. I just came out with this book, or better yet, you just kind of make them aware of something going on in the community that you're involved with that they might be interested in. Tell them what's going on and make that local angle clear in the subject line. Be sure the subject line mentions that you live in. I'm from Philadelphia originally. That you live in Philadelphia or that you live in a community in the Philadelphia area. Make that clear. The smaller the area of coverage, the better your chances are. The Philadelphia is a very large metro area, so if you're pitching the Philadelphia Inquirer, that might be more of a long shot. But if there's if you live in a suburban area where there's a community newspaper or a community website, your odds are probably better. And in this case, it's a good idea. Tailor the pitch for the local media. In other words, don't necessarily send the same pitch that you would send to the fantasy blogger or the science fiction blogger or whatever. Make it a pitch that appeals to someone interested in what's going on locally. I think I've pretty much run out of time, so that's what I have to say, and I hope you found this educational. Thank you.